Right, let's turn our attention to other stories now. Nigeria currently grapples with financial crisis due to her over-reliance on oil revenue, and since the price crash of crude on the international market, the country is struggling to cope with all the enormous responsibilities before it.
States are in debt to their workers. Privately owned companies, banks have had to let go of some workers to enable them adjust to the economic strain in the country. But one area that continues to eat deep into government's pocket is the civil service. Last month, the Minister of Finance, Kemi Adeosun, said the federal government was already borrowing funds to be able to pay the 165 billion naira a month needed to cover civil service salaries. According to her, all government departments currently face a real squeeze in finances.
The situation was further aggravated by the prevalence of ghost workers syndrome, which posed a source of serious concern to government. In spite of the measures taken by government to check the situation, the problem still persists due to connivance of some local government officials.
Governor Gaidam further stated that the action was aimed at surmounting the big problem of ghost workers on the local government payrolls, which he affirmed continues to slow down the development at the grassroots level. Governor Gaidam said his effort to eliminate ghost workers from the payroll of the local government had been repeatedly thwarted, either by the treasurers or the DPMs. Hence, the need to show them the door.
The report reaches us have indicated that appointment letters are being sold to some individuals at negotiated amounts, in addition to placement of some members of families of highly placed personalities on the payroll who do not go out for work. I wish to emphatically say that this situation will no longer be tolerated, and those involved, when found, will be punished accordingly.
The governor revealed that some public servants in the state were recently involved in corruption. He has directed the state head of service to suspend the affected staff and expose them as a way of teaching them an exemplary lesson. He warned those with similar intentions not to test the resolve of his administration. Governor Gaidam charged the new appointees to work assiduously to justify the confidence reposed in them by ensuring prudency, probity, and accountability. Michael Ushoma, TVC News, Yobe State.
All right, you just listened to, or you just watched the governor of Yobe State there reeling out issues about ghost worker. Now we're joined by a former permanent secretary in the Lagos State Civil Service, Joko Tola Ogundimu. She joins us now via Skype from the United Kingdom. Madam, it's good to have you join us right now. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning.
Right, let us understand. In Nigeria, when you mention the word ghost worker, it seems to be a very common phenomenon. People hear this, they hear that. It's a very common terminology. Can you give us understanding? What really constitutes a ghost worker?
Well, usually ghost workers are fictitious or those who are not actually employed by government, who benefit from government's payroll. And most of them are usually done through falsification of personnel record or payroll by fraudsters within the system.
Okay, so they really exist, because some people have said, some labor leaders have said, really that phenomenon is just of figmentation of the imagination of the government, really. So ghost workers really do exist, ma'am.
Pardon?
I'm asking, I'm really just confirming that, so really ghost workers do exist, because some labor leaders have disagreed with the government that there's nothing like ghost workers.
Well, probably there are some, but not, I don't think it will be very large in some of the governments. But it all depends on the particular government in question, the integrity of those people who are doing the work.
All right, so if they exist, we're wondering why there has been no prosecution so far.
Okay, most of the ghost workers are usually how they get into the payroll. Usually some of them are originally employed properly, but they left the service and their names are not taken off the payroll.
All right. Now, why do we have this? Yeah, we can hear you clearly. We can hear you clearly. Now, give us a perspective. You are someone who has traveled far and wide and also made comparison between Nigeria and other countries. Why is this prevalent in Nigeria, or do we have these kind of cases, similar cases, endemic in other countries?
I think part of the problem, as you have earlier mentioned, is the issue of corruption and lack of integrity. Data environment is rather poor because they are able to perpetrate some of these acts because they know the system is very weak, and usually most of the other countries probably they have social security system that discourages such.
Okay.
So I think, okay.
All right. By they, the word they, who are the they really? Some people have accused the higher echelon of the civil service as being responsible. So when we say they, the permanent secretaries, the directors, are they the they you're talking about, ma'am?
No, well, I worked in Lagos State, and I think we have a very rare cases of such. So when I'm saying they, usually you have some accomplices within the system that, you know, most of the civil service is rather large. It's not possible for the permanent secretary to know each and every worker, but it has to do with between the personnel and the accounts section. So it is only when the permanent secretaries are aware of it that they make sure the issues are stopped.
Okay. Now, we'll come back to you shortly. Let's now dig deeper into issues around Nigeria's civil service. Now, the monthly wage bill of the civil service currently represents about 40% of the total spending of government. And this figure, according to Mrs. Adeosun, the Minister of Finance, is too high. She says government is pursuing all aggressive measures to tackle the size and spending of the civil service.
One major challenge identified by present and past administrations in the civil service is the issue of ghost workers. And we heard our guest said, okay, they exist, okay, they don't really. From the local government system to federal ministries, directorates and agencies, the story appears the same, where non-existing workers are used to staff up the payroll as ghost workers, as they draw salaries for doing nothing. For decades, this kind of fraud has continued to drain incredible sums of money from the Nigerian civil service.
All right, let's bring back Joko Tola Ogundimu with here, former permanent secretary in Lagos State. Now, if we make comparison between the 70s and 80s, it seemed the issue of ghost worker seemed to be a more recent phenomenon. What's the difference between that time and now?
I think it's the scale up in the issue of corruption, and when the integrity is low, then you can expect that increase in having ghost worker. I think it borders more on corruption.
Okay, and there are a lot of measures put in place by the Nigerian government now, the TSA, the BVN, and even the IPPS that we have today. Do you think that has helped in any way to curb the corruption you're talking about?
Yes, I think that will go a long way to help, because since the BVN depends on biometrics, so it's going to be absolutely difficult for people to use other people's biometrics. But as long as there's no connivance within the system.
All right, now we know that there has been some level of reforms in the past in the civil service. Can you give us an idea of areas of reformation in the past on the civil service?
Okay. Some of the departments were restructured for efficiency. The assignment of responsibilities of some of the ministries, departments, and agencies were redefined. The administrative guidelines and processes were reviewed. Then the civil service rules and the financial regulations, they were reviewed, and the introduction of the contributory pension scheme.
All right, the benefit of these reforms, ma'am, to help the welfare of the workers so corruption can be curbed, is that correct?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes, please.
All right. Now, you talked about the issue of connivance between the personnel and account section earlier on, now before the permanent secretary can be brought in. Now, if this exists and the permanent secretary, for instance, or the head of service or the whoever is in charge of the ministry knows that these things are possible, how often does he or she checks to ensure that there's compliance within the system to avoid this kind of connivances?
Okay. For instance, in Lagos State, we have regular personnel audits. We have regular personnel audits. So that has helped a long way to scale down such issues, because the internal auditor, once the internal audit system is strengthened, the internal auditor will have to clear each of the employee before they can receive their salary. So that helps the permanent secretaries.
Okay, ma'am, we'll come back to you. Just let's give out more information on the ghost worker phenomenon. A government, in its quest for transparency, has introduced various methods of checking salaries and catching those behind the over-bloated salaries of the civil service. The implementation of the biometric verification number BVN, the Treasury Single Account TSA, and the integrated payroll and personal information system are among other steps taken to check ghost workers.
Now, various federal government agencies have recently rolled out relative eye-catching figures of ghost workers identified or removed from payrolls of organizations. Now, since the introduction of the BVN, several publications have been released to reveal a worrying number of ghost workers.
The Director General Bureau of Public Service Reforms, Dr. Joe Abba, last month said the federal government saved more than 185 billion naira by removing 65,000 ghost workers from its payroll. In March, the Minister of Finance said 11,000 ghost workers were discovered on government's payroll. The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission under Ibrahim Mergu detected 37,395 ghost workers on the payroll of the Federal Civil Service. Really, the question again is, back to you, madam. Even the EFCC discovered that ghost workers, why are they not prosecuted? Those behind this act, really?
I think that's very important, because if they are not prosecuted, then they will still continue. I think we have to put more sanction on such. And that is some of the problems we do have in the country, is because we don't punish irregularities or offenses on time. You have to be more strict and then ensure compliance.
All right. Now, during your days in the civil service, can you give us an idea of some of the very key challenges in the civil service at that time?
Well, maybe I'll talk about performance management. Performance management, especially when it comes to issue of evaluation and then fixing performance for officers. It's not well coordinated as it should be, and several attempts were made to reform the civil service, but I think we still have to put in more effort to get it right.
Okay, all right. Let's talk. Let's talk about the retirement age for civil service. Perhaps this issue of ghost workers is making them want to stay longer than they should. Is it not possible for people to just retire even before clocking 60 or spending 35 years in service?
Yes, it's possible for people to retire before clocking 35 years or 60 years in service. But, you know, as we have it in Nigeria, there's issue of job security. But with the introduction of the contributory pension scheme, it's easy for people to move from private to public sector. And now people can always go with their retirement savings from one organization to the other. But in the past, because the pay pension scheme was only in the public service, most of the private sector don't have the type of pension arrangements we have in the civil service. So many of them, people they rather stay in the public service than go into the private sector. But with the current contributory pension, I think people should be willing to move out at any point in time, as long as employment is there outside for them.
But you know that in some states right now in Nigeria, ma'am, they can't even pay the basic salary, let alone pay pensioners. Do you think that will still be obtainable in the Nigeria of today?
You know, under the contributory pension scheme, the pensioners are not paid by the state government. They are paid by the pension administrators those are in the private sector.
That is if they remit it.
Exactly.
The state government still have to remit. They still have to remit this money monthly. They can't even pay those who are in active service, let alone remit for those who are retired.
But I think that should be an issue for the Pension Commission, because they are supposed to regulate that and ensure pension contributions are remitted to the PFAs.
All right, but from your own perspective, how effective has the contributory pension scheme been all the while?
Well, in Lagos State, it has been well organized, and most of the pensioners are able to draw their pension immediately they retire.
All right.
All right. If we look into repositioning the civil service, you said you've understood the system all the while, and I guess you have projections for the future, even though you're not within the system anymore. But as someone who really understands the system and understands the Nigerian peculiarities, what kind of ways can the civil service be repositioned for effectiveness?
Well, we need to change the culture within this public service or civil service, because where the value system is not there, because we need ethical values that is going to be the foundation of any organization. We need to build stronger institutions. We need visionary leaders who are focused and they are ready to work all the way to attain the preferred future for our people.
Okay, all right. We have more information. With all of this, though, we've talked about the BVN and a lot of measures put in place. Who then makes up the civil service? The Nigerian civil service consists of employees and Nigerian government agencies other than the military.
Now, they are workforce. They are a workforce in the Nigerian political arena, most of who work in ministries progressing based on qualifications and seniority. Now, the structure of the civil service comprises of the ministries and departments.
Others are extra ministerial departments and parastatals of government, bureaucrats and the professionals who work in them. The core concept of the civil service was meant to encourage comradeship, neutrality, high efficiency, and so on. Since 1999, various administrations have tried to reform, reshape, and rebuild the civil service into a world-class service that can implement government policies and deliver quality services to the public.
Now, Governor of Kaduna State, Nasir El-Rufai, is one of the few Nigerians that have openly called for the downsizing of the civil service. Others have said the present administration should consider offering civil servants financial inducement that will make them consider early retirement, all in a bid to cut the size of the civil service and reduce government spending. And that brings us to the question now, ma'am, the issue of over bloating of the civil service. People are calling for the cut down in the size of civil service. Would that enhance effectiveness or efficiency in the civil service?
Well, to some extent it will, because people will have specific role, and the establishment plan will be implemented. That is, the establishment plan, it's based on the number of people actually required to perform the available roles. But as it is now, because due to political reasons, the large unemployment, the weak economy, that's the way I'll put it, because we are not having the jobs out there. For instance, in most of the states, the civil service is almost the only employer of formal employer of labor. So unless the private sector is expands, unless the private sector expands and people have options, then less pressure will be on the public service.
Yeah, it's one thing for the pressure to be on the government to employ people. It's another thing for those employed to be productive. Would you judge the Nigerian civil service to be productive enough to even sustain itself?
Well, I think it varies from one organization to the other, and it all boils down on leadership. And if the leadership, because for instance, when you look at leadership at various times and in various states, you'll know that some are performing, some are not performing. If the leadership is focused, if the leadership is more concerned about achieving a lot for the citizenry, then obviously the followers will make a big difference in their performance.
All right, is the political leadership of a state or the federal government responsible for the effectiveness or efficiency of the civil service?
I won't say solely.
Okay.
I will not say the political leadership is solely responsible for it. The system has its own problem, because even some of the the civil servants, some of them is because they know that the mode of their employment is not because they are the best for such positions.
All right.
And many of them, they really can't get away with anything they do because they have
all right, let's talk about the allegations of the lopsided remuneration in the civil service, where people who are the higher cadre, the permanent secretaries like yourself, and the directors get so much allowances and payment, and those at the lower rank get peanuts.
I think is issue of in the past there used to be issue of relativity in the salary structure in the public service. I think we need to go back to that because where relativity is not put into consideration, and people on political or higher officers are just allowed to take whatever salary they want without saying, okay, for instance, if you say a permanent secretary or a political office holder cannot earn more than so percentage of a salary higher than the most senior or the most junior officer. So then we need to introduce relativity into salaries in the public service generally.
All right. Now, if we make comparison between government establishments and private establishments, there are always this perception that inefficiency and low productivity is found more in government establishments. But we have the same atmosphere, we have the same society and have the same challenges, if I must say. But what's the difference between the performance in the public sector and the performance in the private sector from the perception we have?
You know, in the private sector, they are profit-oriented. In the civil service, it's usually based on government revenue. And in the civil service, it's more of social services, even though most of the reforms that were attempted, we have not gotten the best yet from most of the reforms. And in the private sector, it's usually easy to hire and fire, unlike in the public service, that it's a long process. And then the issue of political influence is also part of issues that are affecting the public service. In the private sector, you hire people because they are qualified and they are the best person available to do the job. In the civil service, you have political consideration. We want to talk about quota system,
the federal character.
Federal character, thank you.
Okay, so is it not time for a paradigm shift? The government can't even pay salaries anymore. Is it not time for a paradigm shift for the civil service to be profit-oriented now?
Well, we are overdue for paradigm shifts because if we want to choose that preferred future, which is very important to us because most of our citizens are not getting the quality of life they deserve. And if we don't have that paradigm shift and do what is the best for the system that can build stronger institutions in the public service, then getting there may take us hundreds of years.
All right, now talk to us about the issue of neutrality. Neutrality seems to be sacrosanct to the civil service. Why is it important for the civil servants or the civil service, or for there to be neutrality in the civil service the way it is?
Well, every civil servant is not expected to be neutral, that is apolitical. A civil servant is not expected to be partisan in any way, or else it will not be in the best interest of the civil service. For instance, political leadership, they can change from one party to the other. So that's why it's important for civil service to be neutral, so that whoever comes into political power can be acceptable and they can work seamlessly with them.
All right, ma'am, do you think, or how can the ghost workers phenomenon be wiped out completely?
Okay, and you have to look at the process involved before you can have a ghost worker. That is, how do their names get on the payroll? And in the first instance, for instance, some of them they are properly employed, but immediately they get into the service and they are leaving the service, they don't resign formally, and some of them, some of the officers who died in active service, nobody processes removing their names from the payroll. So we need to look at some of these processes, and then irregularity in the clearance of workers before issuance of salaries. And we also need to know who are the people collecting the checks or the salaries. In as long as we know those processes, and we can now address the processes. And I think everything should fall on the table of the internal auditor, the audit system within the public service. Once that is strong enough and efficient, I think it will reduce the incidence of ghost workers.
All right, so what the government has in place now called continuous audit team, that should help curb the phenomenon, is it?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. Jokotola Ogundimu is the former permanent secretary in Lagos State Civil Service. Thank you for talking to us on TVC Breakfast.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am.
Now, when it comes to the issue of ghost workers, it has become a very, very common phenomenon, a very everyday phenomenon in Nigeria. All states, except she said, well, we don't really have that in Lagos because there's this checks and balances and continuous check, like the continuous audit you talked about. But this has really given a bad perception about the civil service generally.
Indeed, you cannot overemphasize this. Pardon my way of words, really, but it's something that the government really should look into more. And it's a good thing now that the BVN and the TSA is in place, and that should help. But perhaps there are also issues of bank officials conniving with some of
the she talked about connivance
to fleece the government of such money. So that also should be looked into.
Yeah. All right. We have had a little understanding. We've had some understanding about the ghost worker syndrome.